Just throwing it out there. On Friday, we had a sad passing for many pro wrestling fans. Randy Macho Man Savage died. It appears as though he may have had a heart attack behind the wheel and crashed his car. He was a very popular wrestler. He was a longtime rival of Hulk Hogan. I want to sort of lift the veil behind the sport a little bit and talk about some of the characters in it and some of the maybe some stuff that we didn't know about pro wrestling. On the line is a wrestling expert. He's the author of Wrestling Babylon. Irvin Muchnick is with us. Hi, Irvin.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. How are you?
Good.
So, what was your reaction to the death of the Macho Man? And first of all, I had lost touch with wrestling. I was surprised that he was still alive because he seemed to be, well, I'm not going to say he was on steroids. I don't know that for sure, but he seemed to be really jacked up. I mean, it seems like those jacked up guys didn't last too long.
Well, I think you're on the right track there, Dan. I had a number of reactions. First, a personal one. I'm the nephew of a longtime promoter and president of the National Wrestling Alliance, Sam Muchnick, who died a number of years ago and was the potentate of North American pro wrestling in the era before cable TV and the national and international branding that pro wrestling has now. And my uncle actually got Randy Macho Man Savage, whose real name was Randy Poffo. He was the son of a wrestler, Angelo Poffo. My uncle, through his friend Joe Mathis, a scout for the St. Louis Cardinals, got Randy Poffo his tryout in baseball, and he was signed by the Cardinals, played minor league ball for a few years before he blew out his shoulder and went into wrestling, the family business. So, first of all, the personal connection. Beyond that, as far as my themes, and I'm kind of the Mr. Bad News of chronicling the dark side of this peculiar industry, it's not the best cautionary tale because he was 58 years old. We generally, when we compile lists of the unbelievable pandemic of young deaths in this industry, we sort of arbitrarily cut it off at 50. He was 58 years old. There's no reason to believe there's some direct causal connection with all the things, concussions, drug abuse, and so forth, that we're finding out about in wrestling. But, yes, he was, I mean, there's no question that Randy Savage did a lot of steroids back in the day. We don't know if it caused the car accident or caused his heart attack, but we do now know that he lost control of the car because of a heart attack or some kind of medical incident which hasn't been defined yet, and that he died not from the injuries in the car crash, but from that medical episode. And we're waiting for toxicology reports.
Wrestling expert Irvin Muchnick on the line. How common is doping in professional wrestling? And I mean, how would you say half do it, 3/4? I mean, how many people do it?
Oh, you know, it's just so overwhelming that it's really hard, and you don't want to get into the nasty business of pointing individual fingers, but at people, but it's part of the business. It's part of what somebody has to do in that industry in order to get over, as they say in show business, every bit as much as breast augmentation surgery is for actresses in Hollywood, unfortunately. And we know, too, and I got into all this in not just my first book, Wrestling Babylon, but my more recent book, Chris and Nancy, The True Story of the Benoit Murder-Suicide and Pro Wrestling's Cocktail of Death. That's a book that resonates, especially in Canada, of course, because Chris Benoit was from Western Canada. The pro wrestling industry is really out of control and in need of government regulation. And I don't care what you call it, sports entertainment. The fact of the matter is people are dropping dead at unacceptably high numbers at much too young an age. And the reason is the working conditions, which compel men and women to take steroids and prescription painkillers and other drugs, and to absorb what we're now learning in the larger world of sports is a dangerous level of head trauma. And so the Chris Benoit story has led us to this larger story of chronic traumatic encephalopathy in all contact sports, and we're now seeing the rest of the sports world with lots of suicides and mysterious deaths, like most recently Derek Bugard, the hockey player. And we're seeing that it all is kind of fitting together, and we need to get government to wrap its hands around the sports concussion crisis and also to regulate the pro wrestling industry.
You mentioned Chris Benoit, which was the subject of your latest book. There was a lot of talk after he killed his wife and children about so-called roid rage. Is that the direction that police were going at the time?
Well, I don't think the police did a very good job at all, as I've documented in my book. But again, I call it a cocktail of death. There's a lot of debate over. I don't think there's any question that Chris Benoit took unbelievable levels of steroids, especially at the end. His postmortem toxicology showed a testosterone to epitestosterone ratio of 59-1, which is off the charts. However, what we also know, because his brain was donated to the Sports Legacy Institute in Boston, which is a concussion awareness advocacy group started by a former World Wrestling Entertainment performer and a Harvard grad named Chris Nowinski. And in 2007, they found that Chris Benoit had this CTE syndrome, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So it's pretty clear that he was mentally not himself at that point. There was no reason to believe that he was a homicidal, suicidal person, and something happened to him to make him snap. I don't know exactly what it is, except that it is mixed up in this story of the unsafe and really ridiculous working conditions in our industries of junk entertainment.
On the line is Irvin Muchnick. He is a wrestling expert and author of a book called Wrestling Babylon, and one more recently about Chris Benoit, who murdered his family. And we're also discussing the death of the Macho Man and trying to get a look behind this industry, which is wrestling. Can you hang on for a couple more minutes, Irvin?
Oh, sure, Dan.
Great. It's coming up to 2:45 right now on CJAD.
This is Laxer Live with Dan Laxer on Montreal's News Talk leader, CJAD 800. Sitting in is Dan Delmar.
With the passing a couple days ago of Randy Macho Man Savage, we're taking a look behind the veil of the professional wrestling industry. On the line is a wrestling expert, the author of Wrestling Babylon, Irvin Muchnick. And Irvin, we're just going to get to one quick call. Someone wants to comment on the Macho Man. This is Gordon on the line. Hi, Gordon.
Hi, and hello to your guest. I just wanted to say that I've been a wrestling fan since I was a kid, and I know right now in Quebec, wrestling is very popular. On any given weekend, you can find like maybe 5 different shows going on in Quebec, so the popularity hasn't waned. But I want to address the abuse to the body, from a health point of view, that there's so much stress. The stress is through the roof on these individuals. They don't have any Medicare, and there's no health plan, and it's not like gymnastics where you can take a break, and even in gymnastics, there's a lot of wear and tear on the body, but in the routine that I see them do, they have to compensate, and how do you compensate without having negative consequences? And like your guest said, there's so many negative consequences through death or through tragedies that how do you compensate for all the wear and tear in the body?
Irvin Muchnick?
Well, Gordon has hit the nail on the head when he talks about health insurance, because that's exactly where this conversation needs to go, and it's a larger issue than just about pro wrestling. Wrestlers in WWE are, I think, outrageously regarded as independent contractors, even though their schedules are totally controlled by the company, and really every aspect of their working conditions is controlled by WWE out of Stamford, Connecticut. But they've gotten away for years with the legalistic fiction that these are not employees. That's a practice that is now under investigation by the Connecticut State Labor Department. Their alleged misclassification of wrestlers as independent contractors, and it's an unintended consequence of the $50 million self-funded candidacy for the U.S. Senate last year by Linda McMahon, who is the wife of WWE potentate Vince McMahon and was for a long time the CEO of the company. And as a result of her running for the Senate and losing, there's a lot more attention on this under-the-radar business that they run. So let's hope that will lead to some good reforms. But we also need generally to regulate the wrestling industry. Dan, you were asking before the break, why do people take this so seriously? Mm-hmm. And it's a really interesting story of a postmodern paradox. I mean, wrestlers used to like insist up and down that what they did was real, which was kind of campy and a joke, but they took care of each other. And now, paradoxically, everybody knows that it's just a show, and these guys are killing each other with chairs and weapons and tables and ladders and everything you can imagine, and leading to this brain injury syndrome that we're seeing. And the reason is that they're not regulated. And while people know that it's fake, individuals are driven to stand out by saying, well, everything everybody else does is fake, but not what I do. And there's no way you can fake some of the punishment that's being meted out in this ridiculous gladiatorial level of wrestling entertainment.
Well, that's what's so bizarre to me. I don't know if you caught 60 Minutes last night, but they had a piece on alleged doping allegations around Lance Armstrong. And if you're injecting yourself with testosterone as a cyclist, or having blood transfusions during the race, then you can almost understand that you want to gain a competitive advantage. But given that wrestling is completely fake and staged, why bother trying to jack up even more and get that competitive advantage? I mean, it's predetermined anyway.
Well, I would argue that the competitive advantage is even more pronounced in something like wrestling, because it's totally based, not totally, but so largely based on cosmetics and look. You just can't make it as a wrestler if you're 187 pounds. And even if you are larger, you can't make it unless you're cut and have a particular kind of look. And paradoxically, since the promoters call the shots, they actually have the opportunity to educate their audience in these things and not push to stardom those who artificially, enhance themselves in this way. But they do, which is why we need regulation. And I think what people also need to understand is that this is not a cheating issue. I don't care what professionals are doing to each other at a certain point if they're trying to make millions of dollars. It's their problem. But it's our problem when it becomes a public health issue, yeah. Which is what steroid abuse and what concussions have become at the amateur level of sports today.
I think that's an excellent point, because a lot of people would say, well, if they're just going to, pump each other with steroids to entertain us, well, who cares? But, at some point you have to, deal with, like you said, health issues and workplace safety issues. And the last thing that you want is an employer at even if it's an athlete, to sort of pressure their employees to take these drugs. And that's what I think is most disturbing about this.
Absolutely, and I think that my hope right now, because Senator Richard Blumenthal is the new senator from Connecticut who defeated Linda McMahon, he has a moral responsibility to pursue these things instead of calling it a big joke, because Linda McMahon scared him to within an inch of his political life. And I think he can do some things on Capitol Hill, not just in terms of the independent contractor investigations and health insurance, but also the concussion issue in sports, which we're finding really starts at the National Football League, a $9 billion a year industry, and we need Congress on that case doing more than just talking about football helmet safety promotion, because it's a lot larger issue than that.
Irvin Muchnick is the author of Wrestling Babylon. Very interesting talk. Thanks very much, and R.I.P. Macho Man.
Okay, Dan, thanks for having me.